Hello everyone. This video presents a notable event that happened on each day from the past month in history. On February 1st, 1901, Clark Gable was born in Cadiz, Ohio, and would go on to movie greatness, earning the nickname the King of Hollywood. Despite winning 2 Best Actor Academy Awards and being nominated for another pair, Gable was listed as only the 6th greatest American male movie star by the American Film Institute in 1999. The stars listed ahead of Gable are Humphrey Bogart with 1 Academy Award and 3 nominations, James Stewart with 1 Academy Award and 5 nominations, Marlon Brando with 2 Academy Awards and 8 nominations, Fred Astaire with 1 nomination for an Academy Award, and Henry Fonda with 1 Academy Award and 4 nominations. Oddly enough, John Wayne, the actor that played more leading man roles than any other, earning 1 Academy Award and being nominated for 3 others, finished lower on the list. Who would you consider America's greatest male actor? On February 2nd, 2023, while the U.S. celebrates Groundhog Day, more serious Americans are celebrating a much more important national day, namely National Heavenly Hash Day. You may immediately think of the common offering by ice cream manufacturers consisting of vanilla ice cream with some combination of marshmallow, chocolate, and nuts whipped together in a gustatory delight, but Heavenly Hash can be so much more than that. Heavenly Hash can be concocted from some kind of marshmallow cream or whip mixed with your choice of ingredients, and ice cream is not mandatory. Cakes, fruit salads, candies, and whatever your imagination allows are all fair game. We recommend you get together with friends and family and have an informal contest to see who can bring the most delicious form of Heavenly Hash. Enjoy. As a question for my students and subscribers, do you have a favorite brand of Heavenly Hash ice cream? On February 3rd, 1509, the Arabian Sea portion of the Indian Ocean witnessed a naval battle that had centuries of effects on the global balance of power when a Portuguese fleet defeated a combined fleet of Asian warships at the Battle of Diu, India. The Portuguese put together a force of 18 warships along with 1,200 soldiers to face a fleet of 46 warships and an additional 70 to 150 smaller warboats of the Sultan of Gujarat, the Mamluk Burji Sultanate of Egypt, the Zamorin of Calicut, the Republic of Venice, and the Ottoman Empire. The battle was a massacre, with the Portuguese sinking or capturing almost all of the opposing ships. Modern Portuguese ships and the use of cannons and arquebuses overwhelmed the enemy. The Battle of Diu resulted in over 400 years of European naval dominance over Asia. On February 4th, 1555, English clergyman John Rogers became the first martyr burned at the stake under the rule of Queen Mary I of England, known better as Bloody Mary. Rogers was a Protestant cleric in an England that had turned away from the Catholic Church under King Henry VIII, but when Henry's daughter Mary, a Catholic, assumed the throne in 1553, she did all she could to reinstall the supremacy of the Catholic Church and reverse the Reformation in England. During Mary's 5-year reign, at least 280 religious dissenters were burned at the stake as heretics, earning Mary her sanguineous nickname. When Mary was succeeded by her half-sister Elizabeth I, Elizabeth promptly established an English Protestant church that later became the Church of England, making Bloody Mary's killing spree for naught. On February 5, 1852, the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg, Russia was opened to the public. The largest art museum in the world by floor space, the Hermitage was established in 1764 by Empress Catherine the Great to house her massive art collection. The Hermitage ranks 6th in the world by number of annual visitors, and most lists of greatest museums include it on their honor roll. Other worthy contenders for the title of Greatest Museum would include the Louvre in Paris, the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., the British Museum in London, and the Prado in Madrid. Of course, other museums also stake a claim as the greatest, so we leave it to you to tell us which one you think is indeed the greatest. Note, among the truly great museums, the Smithsonian and the British Museum have the most eclectic collections and are not primarily art museums. On February 6, 1959, An engineer at Texas Instruments, Jack Kilby, filed for the first patent for the integrated circuit, a small piece of silicon with many circuits integrated on it, a device we know as the microchip. Incredibly smaller, faster, and cheaper than the circuits that came before the microchip, these little devices have become the backbone of the electronics industry and are found in all sorts of computers, mobile phones, automobiles, industrial machines, and home appliances. The metal oxide silicon that makes up the base material for the microchip is a semiconductor and gives us the silicon in Silicon Valley, the area of California near San Francisco that is the center of innovation and invention in the electronics field. The replacement for MOS microchips may be made of graphene, gallium nitride, or silicon carbide. On February 7, 1984, 2 astronauts from the Space Shuttle Challenger on mission STS-41B made space exploration history by taking the first untethered spacewalk outside of their spaceship. Not being attached by any sort of lifeline had to be a terrifying prospect, but astronauts Bruce McCandless II and Robert L. Stewart, both on their first spaceflight, operated outside the Challenger free of any safety line for over 5 hours. In 1972, President Richard Nixon announced the NASA Space Shuttle program, an ambitious program sadly remembered for the Challenger and Columbia disasters, but also a program that saw many space exploration firsts and carried astronauts from 16 different countries on 135 flights before being retired in 2011. On February 8, 1587, Mary Stuart, also known as Mary Queen of Scots or even Mary I of Scotland, was executed by the order of Queen Elizabeth I of England, her own cousin. Mary, born in December of 1542, was only 6 days old when she inherited the throne of Scotland and reigned for only 15 years before she was forced to abdicate after the murder of her husband, and Mary remarrying the main suspect in her husband's murder only a month after his acquittal for the murder. Failing to reclaim her throne, Mary fled to England, presumably to be protected by her cousin Elizabeth I. Alas, Elizabeth distrusted Mary and saw in the granddaughter of Henry VII a potential rival for the throne of England, and had Mary kept in confinement for over 18 years, until finally accusing Mary of plotting to murder Elizabeth, ultimately having the unlucky woman beheaded. On February 9, 1907, the city of London was the scene of an epic civil rights march colloquially known as the Mud March, more correctly known as the United Procession of Women. It was at the time the largest demonstration in history for the cause of women's suffrage. Today we name a few others of the most famous or infamous marches. First, the Long March, 1934 to 1935, when Mao Zedong led Chinese Communist forces on an epic retreat by foot over the course of a year, walking about 5,600 miles on the trek. Second, the Bataan Death March, April 1942, when Japanese soldiers marched as many as 80,000 American and Filipino prisoners over 60 miles without food and water, killing as many as 18,000 of the prisoners along the way. Third and finally, the March on Washington, August 1963, when hundreds of thousands of Americans led by Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. peacefully protested against racial segregation. On February 10, 1862, during the American Civil War, the Union fleet won the Battle of Elizabeth City, North Carolina, by sinking the Confederate Mosquito Fleet. So what is a Mosquito Fleet? Generally speaking, a Mosquito Fleet is an unofficial nickname for a fleet of small warships or gunboats. In the case of the Confederate Mosquito Fleet mentioned here, 5 gunboats and a single schooner. Other nations and navies have employed Mosquito fleets, ranging from commandeered private yachts used during the World Wars to converted fishing or utility vessels pressed into military service. A notable Mosquito fleet was the U.S. Navy's fleet of PT boats, fast and heavily armed small craft that could take on far larger vessels using their torpedoes. Future U.S. President John F. Kennedy famously skippered one of these PT boats. As a question for my students and subscribers, what Mosquito fleet do you find to be the most interesting or the greatest? On February 11, 1990, Iron Mike Tyson went into his match against James Buster Douglas as a 42-1 favorite. Not only did Tyson, undefeated and undisputed as the heavyweight champion at the time, lose the fight, he was knocked out in the 10th round. While Douglas's surprise victory is largely considered the biggest upset in boxing history at any weight class, some of the other major heavyweight upsets include James the Cinderella Man Braddock over Max Baer 1935, Max Schmeling's knockout of Joe Louis in 1936, Muhammad Ali's knockout of Sonny Liston in 1964, Muhammad Ali's knockout of George Foreman in 1974, and Leon Spinks outpointing Muhammad Ali in 1978. As a question for my students and subscribers, which heavyweight boxing match do you consider the greatest upset of all? Please let us know in the comments section below this video. On February 12, 1733, James Oglethorpe founded the English province of Georgia, later to become the colony of Georgia in 1752, the southernmost and last of the 13 colonies that would later become the United States of America. Georgia was named after King George II, who had issued the charter allowing for its colonization. The first settlement was at Savannah, and Georgia was the fourth state admitted to the Union in 1788. Known as the Peach State, Georgia's capital is Atlanta, a city of 500,000, although its metropolitan area is over 6 million, making it the 8th largest American metro area. With a population of almost 11 million, Georgia is the 8th most populous state. As a question for my students and subscribers, who is the only U.S. president born and raised in Georgia? Please let us know in the comments section for this video. On February 13, 1919, American football legend Eddie Robinson was born in Jackson, Louisiana. Eddie was born into a working family and earned his B.A. in English from Leyland College at Baker, Louisiana, while playing quarterback on their football team. He later earned his M.A. at the University of Iowa in 1954. In the meantime, Eddie compiled an incredible record as the football coach at Grambling State University in Louisiana from 1941 to 1997, amassing a record of 408 wins, 165 losses, and 15 ties. Robinson retired in 1997 and died at the age of 88 in 2007, widely considered to be one of the greatest college football coaches of all time. Of course, he is a member of the College Football Hall of Fame. Amazingly, Robinson also coached the Grambling basketball team from 1943 to 1956. On February 14, 2000, the American spacecraft Near Shoemaker orbited asteroid 433 Eros, the first spacecraft from Earth to orbit an asteroid. Near Shoemaker had been designed for NASA by the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Laboratory and was launched in 1996. Not only did the spacecraft make history with its orbit, a year later it made space history again by being the first spacecraft to touch down on an asteroid, the same 433 Eros. The spacecraft was named after Eugene Shoemaker, an American geologist that studied impact craters on the Earth, but also studied events in our solar system. After his death in 1997, his ashes were delivered to the Moon via the Lunar Prospector space mission. As a question for my students and subscribers, what space mission would you most like to see accomplished? On February 15, 1996, the Chinese space program took a tragic turn when a Long March 3B rocket malfunctioned and crashed into a Chinese village, killing between 6 and 100 people on the ground. The rocket was carrying an Intelsat 708 communications satellite into space, but veered off course shortly after liftoff from the Zhejiang Satellite Launch Center. While the highly publicized American space shuttle disasters come to mind when discussing fatal space incidents, there have been many failures of space launches that have resulted in the expensive loss of equipment and in some cases the loss of life. Are space programs worth the expense and the danger? As a question for my students and subscribers, do you support the American decision to make new manned space flights to the moon? On February 16, 1904, African-American movie actor and singer James Franklin Baskett was born in Indianapolis. You may not know his name, but the character he played in the Disney classic movie Song of the South in 1946, Uncle Remus, is a beloved part of Americana, as is his rendition of the song Zippity-Doo-Dah. In 1948, Baskett was awarded an honorary Oscar, becoming the first black actor to receive an Academy Award. Other notable African-American births on February 16th include pianist and organist Bill Doggett in 1916, rapper-actor Ice-T and actor LeVar Burton, NBA star Herb Williams in 1958, Football Hall of Famer Jerome Bettis in 1972, and two-time Oscar winner Mahershala Ali in 1974. Do you know why February was chosen as African American History Month? On February 17, 1600, Italian polymath and philosopher Jordano Bruno was burned at the stake in the Papal States of Rome for the crime of heresy. Bruno had the nerve to believe in the heliocentric model of the solar system as taught by Polish astronomer Copernicus, and that the stars in the sky were really distant suns that had their own planets. Further, Bruno opined that unlike the Catholic belief, not only was our sun not the center of the universe is infinite, and therefore could have no center. As he was led to the stake, Bruno had the indignity of having a wooden vice applied to his tongue to prevent him from speaking. As a question for my students and subscribers, who is your favorite historical astronomer? Please let us know in the comments section below this video. On February 18, 2023, the U.S. celebrates another National Battery Day. We would like to take this opportunity to briefly talk about batteries, an electrochemical device used to power any sort of electrical gizmo. Batteries were first invented way back between 150 BC and 650 AD, although we are not sure, the first known example being the Baghdad battery from ancient Iraq that might have been used for medical purposes. Our own founding father, Ben Franklin, coined the term battery for the Leyden jars of the day, and people have been improving them ever since. The modern idea of the battery was invented by Alessandro Volta in 1800. Could any of these battery pioneers have envisioned your Tesla? As a question for my students and subscribers, do you stockpile batteries for an emergency? What sizes do you stockpile? Please let us know in the comments section below this video. On February 19, 1954, the Soviet Politburo, the highest policy-making organ of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, ordered the Crimean Oblast to the Ukrainian SSR. The Crimea had previously been part of the Russian SFSR and numerous cultures, kingdoms, and empires before that. After the dissolution of the USSR in 1991, a referendum of Crimean citizens voted to become an autonomous region within the Ukrainian SSR, and in 1992, within an independent Ukraine. In 1994, Russia, Ukraine, and the United States agreed to the Budapest Memorandum, a treaty that guaranteed Ukrainian territorial integrity, including the Crimea. In 2014, Russia illegally and forcibly seized and annexed the Crimea from Ukraine, and in 2022 invaded the sovereign nation of Ukraine, a war that continues today. On February 20th, 1905, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled that states have the authority to require mandatory vaccinations against disease, well over a century before the controversy over the COVID vaccine in 2020 and 2021. In the case of Jacobson versus Massachusetts, the court ruled that Massachusetts and other states had the right to enforce compulsory vaccination laws and that individual liberty is not absolute. In this case, the disease involved was smallpox, and the law in the Bay State required people over 21 to be vaccinated or face a $5 fine. The vaccines were free and were in response to an outbreak that occurred in 1902. Another 10 states had enacted similar laws. The Supreme Court ruling has since been invoked to uphold the police powers of states in many other cases since the ruling, including areas not concerning vaccinations such as anti-abortion laws and health insurance mandates. On February 21, 1965, former Nation of Islam officer and African-American nationalist Malcolm X was gunned down prior to making a speech at the Audubon Ballroom in New York City. Malcolm had a falling out with the NOI and had received threats and warnings of imminent assassination. While one assailant blasted Malcolm with a shotgun to the chest, two more gunmen fired multiple shots from semi-automatic handguns, hitting him with 21 bullets and 10 shotgun pellets. Malcolm X was killed, and one of his murderers was beaten and captured by the audience, while the other two escaped but were identified by witnesses. All three gunmen were members of the Nation of Islam and were convicted of the murder, although two of them were later exonerated in 2021. A high-profile murder, much conspiracy theory and speculation has followed, with allegations of the involvement of the CIA, the FBI, Louis Farrakhan, Elijah Muhammad himself, and the New York PD. On February 22, 2006, a gang of 7 or more pulled off a heist of a Securus AB depot in Tunbridge, England, absconding with a haul of £53 million in cash. Amazingly, they left behind £154 million because they could not carry it. After placing a gang member as an inside man at the depot, the gang took the manager and his family hostage, fooled employees into allowing them to enter, and robbed the place of cash. Law enforcement moved quickly and began recovering stolen cash and making arrests, and within a year, 36 people had been arrested. Despite these efforts, some suspects remain at large, and £32 million has not been recovered. The U.S. equivalent of the haul is about $92.5 million. As a question for my students and subscribers, what famous heist do you consider the greatest of all time? On February 23, 1903, Cuba made a deal with the United States to lease 45 square miles of land and sea for a period of time with no expiration, virtually forever. In 1898, the U.S. and Spain fought a war, including ground and sea combat in Cuba, then a Spanish possession. The U.S. won the short war and took possession of the Philippines, Puerto Rico, and Guam, while Cuba was freed from Spain and became an independent country. The original rent payment was to be paid in gold, $2,000 per year, but after 1934 the terms were changed to be in cash money instead, and the rent was raised in 1974 to $4,085 per year. A thorn in Castro's side after the communist takeover of Cuba in 1959, the U.S. has maintained a military, naval, and marine base at Guantanamo and have been using Gitmo as an offshore prison. On February 24, 1597, the Battle of Santavuori Hill was fought in Finland, the final battle of the Cudgel War. You may know a cudgel is a thick stick or club used as a weapon, and in an age of firearms and sophisticated steel armor and weapons, the cudgel may have seemed out of date. As they say, necessity is the mother of invention, and the peasants fighting for Finland against the oppressors from Sweden had to make do against their well-armed and well-armored foes. Blunt force weapons such as cudgels, maces, and flails were surprisingly effective against their armored enemy. Of course, the pastoral Finns also employed swords and cannon when and where available, but the large-scale use of club-type weapons gave this war its odd name. The Swedes eventually won the war, and some of the rebel leaders were executed. Despite the romantic notion of low-tech peasants fighting a high-tech overlord, in the end cudgels were no match for modern weapons. On February 25, 1870, history was made when Hiram Rhodes Revels, an African-American man from Mississippi, was sworn in as a U.S. Senator, the first African-American member of the U.S. Congress. Despite being born in North Carolina in 1827, Revels was not born a slave and later lived in Indiana and Ohio. The son of a Baptist minister, Revels was educated in Quaker seminaries and at Knox College in Illinois, later being ordained in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. Revels served in the U.S. Army during the American Civil War as a chaplain, and also helped recruit 2 regiments of African-American soldiers. After the war, Revels moved to Mississippi, where he joined the Methodist Episcopal Church and became a pastor and entered state politics. At the time, the state legislature selected senators, and Mississippi's legislature elected Revels to his historic post as a U.S. Senator. On February 26, 1903, Michael Joseph Owens was granted a patent for a glass-blowing machine, one of 5 inventions he patented for the mass production of glass objects, such as light bulbs and bottles. Owens made the production of glass bottles 80% cheaper and glass bulbs 90% cheaper than handmade objects. His inventions revolutionized the glass industry and helped spur the rapid development of the 20th century industrial modernization. Owens worked for glass pioneer Edward Libby in Ohio, making light bulbs for Edison General Electric. In 1919, Owens joined Libby in creating the Owens Bottle Company, later becoming Owens Illinois Glass Company via merger. For his contribution to industry through invention, Owens was awarded the Elliott Cresson Medal by the Franklin Institute, one of the great Ohio inventors such as Thomas Edison, Charles Kettering, the Wright brothers, and many others. On February 27, 1807, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow was born in Maine, going on to a career in education and especially poetry, becoming the most prominent American poet of his day. Today we ask you, who is America's greatest poet? We list some possible choices with perhaps their greatest poems, but feel free to add your own. Maya Angelou, On the Pulse of Morning. E. E. Cummings, Anyone Lived in a Pretty How Town. Emily Dickinson, Hope. Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken. Langston Hughes, The Negro Speaks of Rivers. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, Paul Revere's Ride. Edgar Allan Poe, The Raven. Ezra Pound, Cathay. And Walt Whitman, Leaves of Grass. As a question for my students and subscribers, who is your choice as America's greatest poet? How about America's greatest poem? Please let us know in the comments section below this video. On February 28, 1959, a Thor Agena A rocket was launched from Vandenberg Air Force Base in California, carrying a spy satellite designated Discoverer-1, the first in a spy satellite program of the American Military and Intelligence Network. Discoverer-1 was intended as the first ever satellite to orbit the Earth via the poles rather than on an equatorial orbit, and was part of the Corona program. Actually a testbed, Discoverer-1 was not equipped with the camera and film that later satellites of the KH-1 type would carry. Unfortunately, the Starcross spacecraft failed in its mission, and is believed to have crashed somewhere in the area of the South Pole. Later launches would prove more successful, with the photographic reconnaissance satellites taking pictures of the Soviet Union and dropping film capsules all the way from space back to Earth for recovery by photographic analysts. The map that you see on your screen now shows the situation in Ukraine prior to Russia's invasion in 2022. The animated map that follows shows the daily progress of the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine as reported on Wikimedia Commons each day from February 24, 2022 through February 29, 2024. Russia's invasion has had 6 major phases thus far. The first phase covers the period from February 24, 2022, when Russia launched a military invasion of Ukraine, to April 7, 2022, when fighting focused away from the northeast and Kyiv and towards the south and east of Ukraine. The second phase covers the period from April 8, 2022, when the area of heavy fighting shifted to the south and east of Ukraine, to August 28, 2022, the day before Ukraine announced the start of its Kherson counteroffensive. The third phase covers the period from August 29, 2022, when Ukraine's Kherson counteroffensive started, to November 11, 2022, when Ukrainian troops retook Kherson. The fourth phase covers the period from November 12, 2022, following the conclusion of Ukraine's Kherson and Kharkiv counteroffensives, to June 7, 2023, the day before the 2023 Ukrainian counteroffensive began. The fifth phase covers the period from June 8, 2023, as the 2023 Ukrainian counteroffensive began, to November 30, 2023. The sixth phase covers the period from December 1, 2023 to the present day. As a question for my students and subscribers, what is your main observation of today's update? Have the most recent developments favored Russia or Ukraine? Please let us know in the comments section below this video. If you liked this video and would like to receive notification of new videos, please feel welcome to subscribe to History and Headlines and become one of our patrons. Your viewership is much appreciated. Finally, to learn more about Ukrainian history, please see #ProjectUkraine. As a question for my students and subscribers, which event from this past month in history would you most like to learn more about? Please let me know in the comments section below this video. If you liked this video and would like to receive notification of new videos, please feel welcome to subscribe to History and Headlines and become one of our patrons. Your viewership is much appreciated. For image, audio, and other credits and attributions for components of the individual videos in this compilation, please see the descriptions of their respective videos, which are linked to via a playlist in this video's description.